I didn't see any group that was taking the founders, the startups, the angels, and connecting them to the big banks, the big corporates, and everyone in between, the lawyers, the accountants, the headhunters, the marketers, the design folks. And that's where the idea came from. I launched it just over a year ago. We now have over 700 advocates in the group, including Eric, including James and Mark and Jennifer, and lots of people in the room who all have a passion about building a vibrant technology sector for London, being on message and communicating about what's happening here, and really an ethos about helping one another for the greater good. And I think one of the reasons why TLA has really grown to where it is that there's a real desire here in London to help one another and to be a group that helps one another for the greater good, which is having a great tech sector in our city.
A year and a half ago or so, I went up to Manchester. This was the first time I'd ever been up there. And and I love discovering the cities outside of London. And the reason I had gone up there is the BVCA had held this fabulous panel discussion on Tech Country. In fact, you led the initiative and you wrote the report. James, why don't you tell us a little bit about what was happening with the tech clusters, how you saw organically this, the Aberdeen, the Leeds, Newcastle. I'll let you go.
So, a bit of background to this. So, the BVCA represents our members from across the country, and obviously there was a lot of attention being lavished on London for very good reason. But obviously, our members from other regions were thinking, well, look, there's stuff going on here. Why isn't anybody talking about it? So, being mildly contrarian, we decided to go and write a report that looked at what was happening in the rest of the country and what the aspects of those different clusters could teach us in terms of cluster development. So I focused on 5 key clusters to look at what we can learn from each of those. So I looked at what was happening in tech and bioscience in Manchester. I looked at what was happening in terms of biosciences and material sciences and tech in Cambridge. I looked at what was happening in Bristol, what was happening especially in things like semiconductors, what was happening in the Midlands in terms of the Formula One cluster, which is a cluster in its own right, and it's a world-leading one, but we don't talk about it in terms of tech because we don't have sort of the usual VC investment. And then I looked at one which really is forgotten quite often, which is Aberdeen, which is actually the world's leading oil and gas technology cluster. And if you don't think those guys are into technology, you think about what it requires to take an offshore oil platform, take all the technology off it, put it onto the seafloor 2,000 meters down, and then provide all the capacity of robotics to be able to service it. And not just that, but actually to find stuff in that kind of depth. So the point of this is there's all these things we have around the country which seem to be sort of, which can be easily forgotten by the politicians in Westminster, and to say, look, this is happening out there. All these different items, all these different technologies, all these different forms of clusters are happening, and the thing that enables all of them is some form of technology. And I guess the sort of the belief that I have is the most interesting that happens with tech and with technology itself is what happens when you introduce it to agriculture or to logistics, or the sorts of things we consider to be traditional industries. When they merge with tech, then all of a sudden really interesting things start to happen. And those are the outcomes of the report itself.
Very nice. Well, I'm very lucky because I've got 2 female entrepreneurs and myself, yay, entrepreneurs, girls. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what it's like to build companies in the UK? I mean, you're rocking it and you're rocking it. So take it away. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, in reference to building companies in the UK, I mean, it's the government's been a great support, from grants to the tax benefits that you get. So we've actually had the chance to take the opportunity on all of them. There's Smart Awards, there's the R&D tax credit, the EIS investment, SEIS. Now, all these opportunities have really helped us grow and actually get investment on board. Now, SEIS has been a great benefit for us. We've had investment on board, which we wouldn't have had, so it's been a great opportunity for us.
Go ahead.
I moved to the UK 9 years ago, and I worked in a lot of very large organizations, media organizations, mobile luxury, before setting up my own company. And when I decided to do so, I was really impressed by how easy it was, and how obviously we were a team of more experienced people. We were working in our industries for many, many years. So it was easier to get in touch with potential investors and get investment into the business, and obviously to get revenues in quite soon. But even so, everything that happened around us, it was more or less at the same time they were mentioning. So at the end of 2010, that's when we set up the company. And I remember that looking back, it was I think in terms of rent, in Tech City, it was much cheaper. In terms of getting talents there, it was much more difficult. Nowadays, it's much easier. But I think from my experience, it's been amazing, and I regret nothing from my past life in big corporations.